Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, we are in the middle of the second wave of the COVID surge, a wave that has actually caught everybody by surprise, which it shouldn't have. And that is really the question that we are going to be discussing. Were we really equipped in any way to handle the second wave? If we were not, whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the system? Is it a fault of the government? Is it the fault of the state government, central government? And also look at our vaccination program, because everybody agrees if there is one way to counter this, it is the vaccinations. But India's vaccination program has raised a whole lot of questions. So to join me in this discussion is Shankar Iyer. He is the author of The Gated Republic and policy expert. Pranjal Sharma, he is author of India Automated and also familiar face on roundtables and Policy Wong. Dheeraj Nair, he is author of Modi and the Markets. He is formerly with Niti Aayog and currently he is the chief economist at Vedanta. So, Nanki Singh, she's a public health expert. She's a communications consultant with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and also the Clinton Foundation. Dheeraj, already I want to begin with you. Basically, I've seen you write a lot also about our vaccination strategy, and that really is the key to this all. So, where are we mucked up?
Well, I think basically the vaccination strategy, as much as you call it a strategy, was framed around, I think, December, January, when the cases were coming down. I mean, it seemed the pandemic had ebbed, and the assumption probably was that there's going to be no second wave, or certainly no second wave of the ferocity that we saw it, which is why you saw the government, hardly ordering that many vaccines, despite having two manufacturers here. So you did very well by clearing it. You had, emergency clearance and all of that, but then you didn't really order much. Whatever you ordered also, you went on a very, very slow distribution path. First opened it for frontline workers only, then for a while for 60 plus, 45 comorbidity, whatever. So, I mean, it was a very slow rollout and not enough orders. And I think fundamentally, the flaw, according to me, is that the government was trying to force some kind of price control on the manufacturer, right? By saying it's only we're going to buy it, or it's going to be sold for 100 rupees, 150 rupees, 250 rupees. That is fundamentally the flaw, because ultimately these are private producers, manufacturing the vaccine, right? Whether it's in India or outside, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they all need to make a profit. The point is that yes, the government has to be concerned about affordability, but that's not the private sector manufacturer's job to be concerned about profitability, right? To be concerned about affordability. So the mistake government made was not offering a remunerative price in the first place. And they could have done so because, if the government had said, I'm going to order 1.5 billion doses and you give them to me over 5 months or 4 months or 6 months or whatever, guaranteed, and I'll pay you, say, something between 150 and 1,000, say 400 or 500, it would have happened, right? You have to give the right kind of incentives. Now, this obsession of keeping the price down and mandating price is what has really caused capacity not to go up. And of course, you got caught napping, therefore, and no recovery was possible once that started. So I think, and now, after that, the government realized the strategy was wrong, and its response was then to, open it up to everybody. So the number on the demand side has suddenly become 800 million when you don't even have 100 million vaccines, right? And that's why you see there's a problem in people getting second doses, people getting first doses. And now you've completely decentralized it and said any state can go and order what it wants, private sector can go and do it what it wants. And states are responding by saying, we're taking out tenders. But this is not that kind of scenario. You don't have hundreds of people manufacturing vaccines who will come and apply for tenders. You have a very limited set of suppliers, all of whom are committed already to various markets. And frankly, whether you're a central government, state government, or a private player, given this scenario, you have to pay a premium to get it fast. You cannot say, I'll only pay 150 rupees or 400 rupees and expect to get the amount of vaccines you want. So fundamentally, again, whatever else we can debate on, the sequencing and, other parts of the strategy, but fundamentally, if you're still not willing to pay a price, you will continue to struggle to get the right amount of supply. And I think the state governments and the central government have to come to terms with the fact that you have to pay more to get it right. And if you order at scale, you will get a much more reasonable price than if you order in smaller batches, which is what is happening now. Each state is ordering for itself, right? They're ordering 20 crores, 5 crores, 2 crores, and that's just fragmenting the entire thing. So I think the vaccine strategy, procurement strategy, pricing strategy, all of that, they got wrong. Two fundamental things, as I said, pricing, and secondly, you assumed there was going to be no second wave or no second wave of this ferocity, so you were going to take your time. And in the end, you got caught out by a second wave, which of course, it's fair enough to say that nobody knew that it would come with such ferocity. I'm not going to blame the government for that. But they should have been ready with a better vaccine strategy than the one they have rolled out. Now they're trying to correct it, but it's already too late as far as this wave is concerned. Hopefully, get over this price thing so that we can preempt a third wave. That would be my concern right now.
Pranjal, that's the thing. We made it from a buyer's market to a seller's market. We have a strategy in place. We have a national immunization policy whereby the center procures and the state administers. Why reinvent the wheel?
There is a lot of merit in what Dheeraj says. Instead of doing it in batches, they could have done it in one go. We are not privy to the thinking which went behind it. I think there is a strong ecosystem of groups of experts who have come together to finalize what the vaccine buying strategy should be. But I also think that, so while that part is open to a lot of questions, in terms of vaccination itself, I think we have to realize that India is equal to the population of, let's say, 57 countries in the world, right? And I think there was a lot of sense in the way that the government went about in doing it in phases, saying that let's do the frontline workers first, then let's go to the 45 plus, 50 plus with morbidities, and then open it to that. Now, if you look at it, every stage, there has been a resistance, political resistance, and a social resistance to it. And honestly, a politically elected government has to be, sensitive to that. Chief ministers, while we talk a lot about, the health investment being under them, not really the central government, the fact is that at every stage, chief ministers have given contradictory advice to the central government. Now, we have to agree on one thing. Does the central government have all the repository of wisdom in a situation which is unprecedented for the world? Or do the state governments also have it? Now, if you're getting multiple and conflicting inputs from various quarters, I think the government has to take the best step forward, given the, partly by instinct, partly by experience, and partly by the advice that they receive. And therefore, I think it's if I were in the shoes of people who are taking a decision, I would be very, very confused. But of course, you have to take a call. You have to move ahead. And I think there has been a plan in terms of vaccinating people. At the time when even the vaccines were exported, they were under a global commitment. But more than that, at that time, the demand-supply mismatch wasn't like this. I think there was no, it is not possible in this world or any country to vaccinate 1.3 billion people. China has not been able to do so. India is being compared with every other country, which is at the high, the biggest country it can be compared with is 1/4 the size of India. That is America, right? With all its resources. The funny thing is that if I look at vaccination, I was watching on one of the US channels that a grand plan which the US technology companies are coming together is how can we replace the paper cards being offered to those vaccinated with the digital tracking of vaccine. India started with that. Now, for all the faults of the COVID platform, the fact is we started with a certain platform which had a scalability. I'm sure there are problems and glitches which could have been avoided and are being taken care of. But the fact is that who can tell us what to do better at a scale and level that India is already doing?
I'm hoping Shankar Iyer may be able to tell us how we can improve it. You're the policy man here, Shankar. If Prime Minister Modi calls you and says, Shankar, fix this mess, what would you do?
I'll first say that there is an old cliche, hope is not a strategy, neither is hubris. This is a textbook case on how not to do it, and I hope WHO puts together a book and distributes it among its member countries on how not to do things. So there are many questions but here's the achievement of the health ministry. I mean, with all the capabilities that we administer polio vaccines, we have a digital landscape, we have Aadhaar, we are a digitalized country, all of that. Here's what the health ministry has achieved. In its management of the pandemic, it has made vaccines very important, alerted people to the need for vaccines. And its management of the procurement program, it has created demand without a supply. I think all of the issues are about the expert advice that the political establishment gets. So who or what was the advice that they got when they allowed the elections? Who did Election Commission consult? What was the advice that they got that they allowed the Kumbh Mela. What was the advice they got in January when they ordered 16 or and on the basis of what advice did they wait till April to order the second tranche? These are questions, and I personally think the system which has been advising the government on these issues, somebody has to be accountable. Who were the people who defined this? Now, suddenly last week, you had this new policy that, the second jab can be given 12 weeks, and the basis offered was scientific advice from the UK. That advice was available in February. Why didn't you implement it in February? Why did you have to wait till May when you ran out of vaccines to implement it? All the points about the economics of scale, the magnitude of the pandemic, all are at one side. I think that someday, and hopefully soon, somebody will have answers as to who are the experts and what was the expert advice that the health ministry and the task force gave to the leadership. These are the questions, and some heads must roll.
I find myself actually in agreement with you, Shankar, on this one. But Nanki, before I get the others back in, a little bit about, we've discussed the magnitude of the tasks ahead of us, but the public health infrastructure in India, I mean, it's in shambles, really. Or do you think that we had a chance and we just blew up the chance?
I also want to say I wholeheartedly agree with the points that Mr. Iyer just made. But, at a very fundamental level, health systems comprise of 6 building blocks: the health workforce, information systems, access to essential medication, financing, and governance. Now, unfortunately, these were all areas that we were lacking in even prior to COVID. And we might have had increased bouts in health spending, but right now just about a meager 1.3% of our GDP, which is the lowest in the world allocated towards healthcare. We need to invest more in our public health system, and we need to, strengthen what we have right now and not reinvent the wheel, but strengthen our current system to make it more efficient, to make it more coordinated, and to have better capacity and responsiveness. Also, another problem when we talk about public health in India is that we tend to forget that the public is not just limited to, bigger towns and cities, but to rural India, which is 650,000 villages, which is 65% of our population. And the issues that we're facing today, right now, because of COVID in urban India, are essentially problems that rural men, women, and children face on a daily basis: access to basic healthcare, access to basic, health infrastructure. And for example, the oxygen shortage has recently made global headlines. But it's not a new problem in India. As recently as 2017, actually, about 60 children died in a span of about 48 hours in Gorakhpur in Uttar Pradesh because of lack of oxygen. And it was the same problem then, the same problem that we have now. And then besides the structural issues that do exist in India's public health system, India also has a double burden of disease. And then compounding that again is, older diseases that we still haven't been able to overcome, whether it's TB, whether it's cholera. 2.4 million people die annually in our country from completely treatable diseases. A child dies every couple of minutes because of pneumonia and diarrhea. And I'm not saying this to build a sordid picture of, the situation, but it's to point out that none of this is new to us. This is not a novel narrative for India. We have known all along of these gaps, of these deficiencies, and fragilities in our public health system. But the only reason we're talking about it now is because COVID has made us see these and experience all of these problems personally. And so I do sincerely hope that we use this pain and anguish that COVID has put us through to bring in real and genuine change and sustainable change and investment into our current public health system.
Investment into the public health is something that people are talking about. The budget that was woefully short, actually, despite it being 1 year into COVID. Dheeraj, before the break, there is a political also lapse, really, for want of a better word. We were in the middle of the first wave. Did we plan accordingly? Did we budget accordingly? Or did we just announce that India's managed everything well and therefore, we are above it all? Did we declare victory too early?
Well, obviously, the answer to that is yes now, in hindsight, but hindsight is always perfect. That said, again, some of the problems which were highlighted earlier of our lack of health system and, generally poor infrastructure, we knew all of that. And I think, obviously, the pandemic is a once in a century event, or, at least, very, very rare black swan event. So you can't expect any current government anywhere in the world. And in the first phase, I think, a lot of the countries in the West also struggled, right, to deal with it with far superior infrastructure to what we had. I mean, in Europe, you saw the amount of deaths that happened. But I think what we learned from the first wave, so we experienced the first wave, and for whatever reason, the first wave was not so severe on us in terms of mortality, at least, and, the severity of disease. And I think from that, the learning was that, look, for some reason, whatever reason, Indians don't get this as badly as, Americans or Westerners or whatever, there was that kind of hypothesis. And I think generally the expert advice to the government was probably, again, I have no knowledge of it, but was probably that we are over the worst. And if you actually scan back at some of the public writing and commentary, during December, January, February, a lot of people who are not in government, experts who are not in government, said there may be a second wave, but it's unlikely to be, very severe. And these include experts who had predicted millions of deaths in the first phase and, all of that. So these were not experts who were taking a kind view of the virus. So I think in that sense, a lot of us as in a lot of people, all of us were in the sense lulled into a sense of complacency. That did happen. But again, if you're getting the right kind of expert advice, as Shankar was talking about, it's also what is the advice you're getting. So surely somebody was telling you from the lessons of the Spanish flu or lessons of other pandemics that they don't go away with one wave. And sometimes the second wave comes with more ferocity than the first wave, or the third wave comes with more ferocity. So we should have been ready, and we had the time. I mean, we were very lucky that the first wave was not so harsh on us, because then we were really underprepared. We didn't have masks or PPE kits in this country. When that pandemic started, we didn't even have the basics. Forget about advanced infrastructure. So we got that time, and we had the time also. I mean, I'm not saying that we could have vaccinated 1 billion people in 3 months, but we could have certainly done more than we have done so far, and we could have done more in the next 3 months than we will do. So I think a lot of it is the story of complacency and not getting the right time of advice and wanting to declare victory, which I can understand. In politics, you always want to declare victory if you see a chance of declaring victory, right? I mean, when other countries have struggled and you've done well, I mean, the US, UK have struggled and you've somehow beaten this pandemic, you want to declare victory. But yeah, that is premature, and policy should not be framed on that. So even if politically you're making certain statements, your so-called experts or your ministries and your state government, everybody should be working to make sure that you're ready to tackle any future wave. But that, as we know now, there were no meetings of the expert committees. There was no serious attempt at ordering vaccines. So clearly the entire system, not just the political leadership having declared victory, the entire system took it as a message to, that's it, that we don't need to do more. We are through this. Vaccination will keep happening as it happens. It's not something which is urgent. So that, I think, is where fundamentally we went wrong. And our system, at the end of the day, Priya, again, sorry to say, come down to the system, but our system is not the most nimble. I mean, when I talk about the state system, the government apparatus is not the most nimble in most circumstances. So even when the second wave started, you see, by the time we got down to tackling the oxygen shortage or, the medicine shortage or various other things, a lot of people had lost their lives. So a nimble system, even after it had got complacent, would have reacted much faster and got into the act much faster. You can say maybe it was partly political distraction. But again, just because one or two people are busy in politics, a robust system should function nonetheless and be preparing for all these eventualities, which he didn't. And then you were running, and they did an admirable job later, but it's after the horses had bolted, right? So you did in the end get oxygen and so on. But the peak, a lot of people lost their lives because of it. So we don't have a nimble system. We don't have a problem-solving system. Our system tells you what problems are. They'll tell you immediately what 100 problems are, but they will not tell you even 20 solutions for them. So that is our system. And until fundamentally, I think, again, this is not only a chance to reform public health infrastructure and take a new look at it, but fundamentally, if I was the PM, I would be very disappointed at the way the entire system has responded. And I would really look to overhaul it completely. Not just for a pandemic, but any crisis. We need a far better system and far better responsiveness from the system than we've got.
Pranjal?
2 points. One, I'm going to go outside India, and second, I'm going to go deeper into India. First, about outside India. More than 1 million deaths in Europe alone. Again, Europe has, and India has not reached that level. Europe has 1/3 India's population. Dheeraj said well about the victory. Have you seen what's happened in United States? In January, for example, they had 3.5 lakh cases every day. Cities like Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles had the same kind of problems that Delhi and Mumbai had. Lack of oxygen, lack of beds. Even as we speak, the same thing is going on in Japan right now. So I'm talking about situations where, since all of us are very busy criticizing our own governments, we should also realize that the governments who we think are far, far better, smarter, more intelligent, more alert, have more resources, have gone through the cycle and faced and suffered as much, if not more, than what India has done. And see what has happened in the last 1 week. The president of the USA has declared victory over the virus. They've said, okay, we can live mask free. And you know what? The CDC is being questioned by everybody, saying that how can you do it? And the wonderful thing is they're saying if you have been vaccinated, you can go ahead and roam around without the mask. But nobody knows how to identify a person who has been vaccinated. You know what they have? A paper card to carry along with them, if at all. It's not mandated. So each state, more than 50 states in US, has a different policy. And I fear that, the last has not been heard about the surge in US yet. And the government, which we think is far more evolved, intelligent and more resourceful than our wretched country, should probably see some more crisis coming through. That's one. Secondly, as far as the health infrastructure is concerned, I think, of course, the Prime Minister's office and the central government has a very, very crucial role to play. But think about it, Priya, you've covered so many elections. Shankar and Dheeraj have been involved in that. Last state elections, 5 states, which of the campaigns were about health infrastructure? First set of post-COVID elections that were held in India, did COVID figure in the election campaigns? Did COVID and health infrastructure decide the voting pattern? Now, if that is the system, the polity and the political system where the voters don't care, the political parties don't care, then how do you, in a post-apocalyptic scenario, suddenly go and say, well, I think only the central government is responsible, especially when health and education have always been under the state. Nothing stopped any of the state government in the last 18 months to spend an extra $20 million or $100 million, which is well within their budgets, in improving their health infrastructure. So I think the responsibility is distributed. It's very well to accuse and question the central leadership, absolutely fine. But are we then letting the others abdicate their responsibility?
So Priya, just to clarify, when I say the system is unresponsive and weak, I don't mean central government. I mean the entire administrative machinery from top to bottom. And then you have one exception like the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, which does something different and innovative, but that just proves the rule. Then the rest of the system, and that's at the municipal level that they got their act together, not at the state level, not at the central level. So I think its system as a whole means all across. It's not a matter of pointing blame at center or state, but it's just the entire machinery does not respond.
Shankar, your take on the conversation so far?
You see, the only thing novel about the pandemic is the coronavirus was novel. Everything else was known. That this is a country of 1.4 billion people with just 1 million doctors, or the healthcare system, or the fact that a state like Bihar has a per capita spend on health, which is 1,250 rupees, which won't be enough to cover for the cost of 2 shots of a vaccine and an RT-PCR test. So that's where we are, and that is what the reality is. The second point is, world over, the decisions on managing the pandemic were taken at the top, at the national government level. It is all good to say that we have done better than other states, but is a country supposed to feel satisfied with is our measure of how well we have done resting on how poorly somebody else has done. That's not the point. The point is vaccines were procured in each of those countries at the top, at the central level. The United States has 50 states, but the vaccine program is a national program. They have issues about digitization. It's a liberty conscious country. Everybody, they wear the right to bear arms or bear their face without mask. All of those issues are. But I don't think I'm very concerned about what they did or didn't do. And that the point that I am saying is that we have the potential, we have the skills. We are a people who can put a Mars mission at the cost of less than what it cost Hollywood to produce Gravity. That is our cost frugal engineering. That is what is possible. And we didn't think enough. We didn't think enough about how we are going to deal with this. And so this is the point that I'm saying, is that the problem in India is that everybody is authorized and nobody is accountable. Now it's 5 months into the second wave, or 4 months or 3 months, depending on who is timing at what level. I think that the second wave started somewhere in Feb 15 when the cases went up from 12,000. So in the last 3 months, do we know how many times the task forces met? Is that documentation there? Are there minutes? Who attended those meetings? What were the decisions taken? What were the guidelines that they issued to the states? What did the state governments do? We covered the national budget like it's some Diwali, Christmas, and Easter put together. But we don't cover the state budgets, which are pathetic. I mean, the conversation around state governance. So these are issues. The government of India had a grand program called 100 or 150 aspirational districts. Now, I've done some work on India's worst districts about 20 years back, and I know what is the state of the worst districts. Now, how many of those 150 districts did better than the other districts? That's the question. Did any of them measure up to Nandurbar? No, they didn't. The question is that what did we do between the two waves? I think we didn't do enough. We didn't think enough. And when we say that system is failing, is that people who have qualified immunity, that is the civil service, the task force, didn't stand up, didn't measure up. And that's why, again, I will say heads must roll.
Yeah, that's really, Nanki, we're totally out of time. So I'm going to give you the quick answer I want from you. How confident are you about the third wave, or are we going to see the same mess as in the second?
Well, I hope that we do not see the same mess. I hope that we've learned from our mistakes right now. And I do want to say that, we've spoken about a lot of negatives, but I'd like to end on something positive, is that I think throughout COVID in the past 1 year, what has been the silver lining, what has been really heartening to see is that people, individuals, communities have really come together. So put aside the government and all the failures that have occurred there, but it's been really wonderful to see the collective action of civil society. And we do need that now more than ever to promote COVID appropriate behaviors, to share medication and necessities.
Okay.
I'll give you a line, Nanki, I'll give you a line to sum up that. Welfare society stepped in where the welfare state failed.
Okay, that's
a wonderful way to sum it up. Thank you.
I think I'm going to end with that one. I was going to say where the system failed, but yes, where the welfare state failed, people stepped in. So that is a positive note indeed. But thank you all for watching this show, and thank you all of you for taking part in this discussion. Thanks.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.